Hello world, and welcome to Beachhead by Jeffrey Hess. Today we're going to be reading the first page and decide if we would want to read more of this. Partially because I've already purchased this, so let's see if we made a good decision. Chapter 1, Tampa, Florida, August 13, 1980. Scotland Ross heard a noise he didn't immediately recognize as the sound of a boot heel on the living room tile. He stood barefoot in boxer shorts, elbows propped on the pedestal sink in his bathroom, his index fingers strangled red by the tension of waxed white dental floss. The better part of the day had been spent sautéing his brain in vodka, but he never missed a night, no matter how late he worked, or since losing his job, how much he drank, or how tired he was, or how long it took. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Since he'd been on parole, he no longer had to face the painful memories sober in the dead time before unconsciousness. The noise had made him lose track of where he left off. He paused the touch string in front of his open mouth, anticipated the next footstep, but heard only the hiss of fluorescent bulbs that attached yellowness to everything in the room. He dug the floss in the tight space between the bottom front teeth and tugged back and forth. Most likely it was Dana in the other room. She had a key and was the only reason he'd moved to St. Pete. Being his sister meant that she could come and go as she pleased, no questions asked. Being a booze whore meant she periodically got too drunk to go home and in too bad a shape for any man with the roof over his head to take her in and do what he wanted. She'd crashed at Scotland's a few times in the year he'd been a free man and a civilian. She probably kept the lights off in an effort not to wake him this time. "Hello?" he called, walking into the hall, untwining his index fingers and looking both ways. And that is actually the end of the first page. So first impressions, well, we got a little bit about this character. He's obviously an offbeat character because he was in prison and he talked about being an alcoholic, and he's still an alcoholic after being in prison, and he's grateful that he can drink. So we know that about him without it going heavily into, this is why I drink. So I really appreciate that. We get a lot of tidbits of his character without heavy exposition. So that's good. We also learned that his sister is also an alcoholic, so maybe it sort of runs in the family. It's part of the family culture. They're just kind of okay with it. And we also know that she relies on him even though he's been in prison. So she is not the most reliable person either. So we've got a good idea of this main character. He's a little offbeat character. He's going to be an anti-hero for sure, but we already knew that going into this, with it being a sort of being described as a Punisher-style book. I would definitely read more of this because I don't hate the writing style. I do find it a little weird how much detail was put into the flossing of the teeth, and it's going to take a little bit more reading into it to see if that was something that the character is particularly interested in paying a lot of attention to, or if that is something that the author felt like he needed to write. I know that when I'm writing early drafts of stuff, I tend to overwrite scenes because I think I need the words, and then it takes me a couple drafts to get that writing out if it's not necessary. I also know that one of the tips that writers get that I struggled with a lot early on was that write the details of the scenes, because if you skipped something, oh no, I don't know how your person got to the car. But then you get other people that go, why are you going over every little bit of what it takes to get outside to the car? You don't have to tell us. And then he put on his shoes, and then he locked the door, and then he unlocked the car door, and then he climbed in the car. A lot of people will start doing that. I know that I started doing that after I'd gotten the critique that told me I needed to have more details because I couldn't just take this character from this room and then put them in another room, or I couldn't just have them move from one activity to another, because then people go, well, how did they do that? But a lot of books actually do that, and it's not that confusing depending on how it's done. Most of the time, you don't need to go through every tiny detail to get somebody from point A to point B. And I think in this case, the usage of the dental floss in all of its detail was a way to build some anticipation, some atmosphere, because they obviously wanted to slowly introduce that the sister was sneaking in and that she shared the space. And if he's brushing his teeth when she walks in, then you kind of have to take your time with it, because if you just summarize it into one sentence and say he was brushing his teeth and somebody was walking through the door, blah blah blah, then the anticipation's not going to be there quite as much as, and then the string is wrapped around fingers The way that it mentioned it also did it in a more aggressive manner by mentioning how the string was tightly bound around his pulsing red fingers, and since he's going to be a kind of vengeance style person, then it helps you build into that character. So how about we read page 2 and see where we go from there. It could be that redhead from the Publix on Gulf Boulevard, desperate for another overnight trip to Tinkletown. Or it could be some coked-up loon out to score enough cash for more drugs, or maybe some psychopath jonesing for the thrill of homicide. The only thing of value in this place was a few bucks stashed in a shoebox beneath the old Webley 32 he'd bought from a carny behind the tilt-a-whirl at the state fair back in February. Chilled air from the living room moved across his bare skin while sweat beaded on his forehead. The bathroom light went dark behind him. His vision became orange and brown spots. Like soup stains. What the fuck? He called into the darkness as he dropped his floss. He had no proof that the Webley shot straight, but even if he could get to it quick enough, he wouldn't know where to fire. He crouched and swung wide at the soup stains in front of him, trying to protect himself. The last time his heart raced this fast had been with a skinny kindergarten teacher with a disco hair. His adrenaline spiked differently now. A fight of some sort was unavoidable. He felt it in his stiff fingers, which throbbed with his pulse. His eyes hadn't adjusted yet, and he felt naked despite his boxer shorts. He groped his way back toward the bed, hoping to get his revolver and use his mattress as cover if shots were fired, but stumbled over the corner of the bed opposite the door and smacked his head on the nightstand. His fingers came back dry after he searched his skull for blood, but his ears rang with a high-frequency hum that sounded like a flush of a public toilet. His breath cycled fast and slow, filling just the top portion of his lungs. He needed to deepen his breaths, slow his heart rate, and calm his mind so that he could think rationally, just as he'd learned in Leavenworth. With the room lost in flashes of orange and brown, he focused on his breathing. He stood, shook his head to clear the vision, but failed. He reached and felt the rough-hewn paneling as he groped his way toward the door. With his other hand, he threw blind jabs. The rattling and hum of the wall unit air conditioner in the living room filled the quiet. Cold air carried the smell of cologne. Scotland never wore cologne. He jabbed and listened for footsteps. So that is the end of page 2 and just the top of page 3. And we are in an action moment, which I think is a great way to start out a book. You've got the momentum going, you've got the main character in danger, and you've got something at stake. He is clearly waiting to be attacked, or already permanently. He's clearly waiting to be attacked, or assuming he's already being attacked and attacking the air. The one thing that I don't think I like at the moment is the author's voice choices. They mentioned in one page the brown and orange like 3 times, and that's just in one page. Some of the detail seems a little over the top and unnecessary, like I was saying, to kind of draw out the scene, to build the tension, but I think it's going a little over the top with the step by step, so it's not necessarily building the tension for me, but being a bit of a distraction of here's every little detail. But it's not annoying enough for me to put it down and not continue reading, so hopefully I will continue reading this and come back with more to say throughout the book. And if you want to pick up Beachhead by Jeffrey Hess, I'll link it in the description below and you can pick it up from there. It is published by the indie press Down Out Books, and they do all sorts of action, Florida-based, I think, often, and a little more risque and action-y. Seamus XXX was from them, and that was trying to be Magnum P.I., but with all of the sex still in it, I think, is a description. So it's kind of got a nerd having sex all the time and getting worn out by it. And when I say with all the sex left in it, there is a fair amount of sex left in this book. To try to find a missing girl, he impersonates a porn star. So there's that. Content warning, there is some rape in there, and there is some man rape in there. Yeah. And it is nothing if not creative and surprising, but that's what I gotta say. If you want to know more about Seamus XXX, I'll also link my review of it down below, so you can check that out, and see you in the next video. Bye.